You might be wondering what is happening here. Well, yes, I am giving away my Newport NT300 electric outboard motor. But why would I do that? To answer that question, we have to back up a little bit. Last summer, Newport Vessels gave me this 3-horsepower electric outboard motor. They wanted to get it into the hands of people who would try it out and share their experiences. And I have done just that. My initial video with this electric outboard motor has over 800,000 views and is my most viewed video on my channel to date.
This outboard motor is going to change boating forever. I honestly believe that.
I followed that video up with a more in-depth review and assessment of the motor, talking about what I liked and what I didn't like after using the motor for several trips out on the water.
Some of this I might be nitpicking, but one of the negatives I see is that there's no steering lock. They make a little pin that you drop in that locks the steering perfectly straight ahead. And that's if you're using a rudder to be able to steer the boat. So if you're using rudder to steer, you can lock this motor straight ahead. But I can't tighten up or loosen up.
This electric outboard motor has been used for several other trips and videos that included a speed comparison against my ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 Plus.
Be generous and say 5.3. So it's 0.2 of a mile faster than the ePropulsion for me, I think.
And I've also used it to push my 17-foot waterlogged Boston Whaler. All of these videos can be found in my Newport NT300 playlist, which I will link up here. But over the winter, something happened to the battery that came with my Newport NT300. It just became unusable. I don't know if it was because I didn't follow the proper long-term storage procedures, or maybe the BMS went bad, but either way, I wasn't able to use it at all. And, lucky me, I have other little outboard motors, like the ePropulsion. And this beautiful yet smoky 1958 Johnson. So I wasn't in a big rush to get this sorted out right away. During that whole year, while I was running all of my little outboard motors, my buddy Forrest in Florida, who has the YouTube channel DIY Waterworld, where he does some really neat and usually very cheap boat projects. You should go check his channel out. Well, he had ideas for projects that might be a good match for a little electric outboard. And I am talking about real projects, not just sticking a tiny ePropulsion onto an old 17-foot waterlogged Boston Whaler, basically making a miniature shipping barge. No, I'm talking about real and actually interesting projects. So a few weeks ago, he and I were catching up on a phone call, and he was asking my advice about which electric outboard motor he should buy because he really likes the look of the Mercury, but wanted my thoughts on some of the other brands. I realized, rather than him spending money, I had the perfect motor for his project sitting right here in my garage. All he needed was a new battery. And that's what brought us to this. But where are we, and why are we here? Well, Forrest lives in South Florida, and I live in Maryland. So it is not quite as far as Nebraska, but we are over 1,000 miles from each other. But we're both able to get away for a couple of days and meet up at a halfway point, which just happens to be a little place called South of the Border in South Carolina. For this trip, I actually took a car instead of a big cargo van or my truck. And wouldn't you know it, everything fit just fine in the trunk. It was going to take both of us a whole day to get there, but we both wanted to hang out for a little while we were at South of the Border. For those of you who don't know, south of the border started out as a beer stand in 1949, located just over the state line from North Carolina. Now, back in 1949, North Carolina did not sell alcohol, so for people who lived near enough to the South Carolina border, they could stop in and get some beer. By the time the Interstate Highway was being built to pass right by the place in the early 1960s, south of the border had expanded, and they now sold fireworks because fireworks were also illegal to sell in North Carolina. By the 1970s, south of the border was well known by everyone and anyone traveling Interstate 95 through the Carolinas, because they had dozens of billboards set up for hundreds of miles and had built the place up into a really kitschy roadside attraction that was impossible to miss. Many northern states had strict firework laws, not allowing fireworks that shoot up into the air to be sold to the general public. And South Carolina was the last stop for people heading north where they could buy good fireworks on their trip home from Disney World back to places like Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, or any other state in the Northeast US. Many of these old roadside attractions, like south of the border, have disappeared, so if you're ever traveling down Interstate 95 through the Carolinas, be sure to stop by here just for the experience. So yeah, I gave him everything, including the battery that doesn't work. But that's okay, because the beauty of this motor is that it can work with any 36-volt system, and he's got some huge plans for this motor. So if you want to see what he's working on and find out what happens next with this Newport NT300, be sure to check out his channel, subscribe to his channel, and see some of the projects that he's working on and has done. Because his channel is where the next chapters are going to be written, or I guess produced, since this is YouTube. Thanks for watching.